Hello. Yeah, no problem that we actually decided with Christian that we share the responsibilities for the presentation. So I'm just having my own presentation. The Christian's part was mainly about more of this theoretical side of the adaptation, that it comes from that we aim to individualize the learning experiences of the student and how we can enhance equality with adapting. And in my presentation, I'll shortly present the artist's learning environment called number trace, what can be done with that, and 2 study results that me and my team, for example, Manuel has been co-authoring both of those. Another one is published and another one is in revision process. So the number trace game-based learning environment is highly configurable research and learning environment developed for rational number instruction. So we see game-based learning in general, that with game-based learning we can extend our understanding of learning in general, and we can of course use it as an instructive mechanism. The game is built around estimating rational number magnitudes on a number line. The player controls this dog and on the number line and tries to estimate the given fraction, in this case 2 out of 6. This estimating fraction or rational number magnitudes on number line is a well-established instructional method in like this mathematical cognition learning. So the main game mechanism is built around that students, learners do that. We utilize several well-established design principles. For example, utilization of emotional design, like these bright colors, emotionally enhanced feedback, and then there is this intrinsic integration of instructional content, meaning just that main game mechanic is based on the instructional purpose of how to instruct rational number, and the game is just doing that. We do not use these, like, for example, that learner does something in the game-based learning environment, and then there is this prompt box that asks that how many this and that, and you answer that and continue game. But the game is purely based on estimating fraction numbers on this level. As well, we have clear goals and feedback mechanics. Here is what kind of feedback can be given. On the left side, after the correct answer, we show the correct location of the estimated fraction and player gets points and this estimation accuracy. However, after the wrong answer or 2 wrong answers, also the correct answer is shown to enhance this cognitive processing, providing how this problem should be conceptualized or modeled. And the dog looks sad. So the individualization of the learning process in number trace. Virtually all aspects of the number trace can be adapted or modified. For example, task difficulty, that the second study will utilize. Task presentation, for example, here the addition of 2 fraction or rational number is presented with this pie chart, and these can be utilized, for example, to scaffold that after the correct answer we can scaffold that, okay, here is the graphical representation of the rational numbers. We can give different kinds of instructional support. For example, here, after the incorrect answer, the number line is divided in the meaningful partitions. This aids the estimation of the correct fraction number, and of course gives you like this mental image of how to like try to solve this problem. So as you probably know, the scaffolding term itself is like trying to help the students, but also that student is able to do better next time. It's not just like overcoming the problem, it's also about learning. So here we have like this tutor figure that can be activated based on the performance, based on, for example, questions, that little bit what Roger referred earlier, like that we can utilize same kind of the all in there. That, for example, if we could analyze that students have some sort of misconception in certain tasks, we could like program that tutor to, hey, try out this strategy. Perhaps this help you overcome this problem. And we have this like, these are just a few of these mechanics that can be implemented in the game-based learning environment. Perhaps Christian can share the link that has more of these. But importantly, these adaptive practices are relatively easy to code, even I can do. So there is like 2 layers of coding going on. So there is this hard code that takes all the game mechanics, and this like more surface level coding that goes all these instructional procedures seen in here. So what kind of fractions students estimate, what kind of feedback they receive, what kind of scaffolding features they get. It's relatively easy, and we are currently developing a visual interface or graphical interface for this, so everybody in this room could do these kind of tasks and design these tasks and adaptation mechanics to serve your own research purpose. So let's continue. Our game allows in-game motivational, emotional, and learning preference measurements. On the left side, you see this self-efficacy related question. I will certainly perform well on this forthcoming task. On the right, situational interest related questions. And these are like intrinsically integrated. These utilize, as you can see, exactly the same game mechanic. On the left, I forgot to say, is the progress bar. Okay, there is like 10 tasks in this level. At the beginning of the level, we can ask how well you think you will perform in this test. And after students have completed, for example, 10 estimation tasks, we can ask how interesting these were. And with this kind of intrinsically integrated measurements, I know that Roger was a little bit against of these self-reported measurements, but this is quite nice way that students can answer these kind of questions. For example, we can design game levels with different types of game mechanics, different type of scaffolding feature, and ask afterwards, how interesting you find this? How interesting was this level of game? And because we can utilize these sort of questions, adaptation can be based on cognitive, performance-based, motivational. If we ask motivational question, for example, how valuable do you see these tasks? Emotional or affective, do you feel bored? Or, for example, these kind of questions. And or learning performance information. Preference information. Would you like to have more easier tasks? Would you like to have harder tasks? And of course, it would be really interesting to see that if students would have this, could choose this, how would it affect their learning? And of course, we can do a combination of these measurements, like build these algorithms that, okay, if they are bored and they do badly, then, for example, the tutor figures show something. If they are anxious, they do really well, and what are the results? But we have used mainly the cognitive performance or the task performance as the main influence of the adaptation mechanism. But these are like they are already implemented in the game environment and ready to use if we just have students to participate and try out. Okay, then the studies. The first study we examined, does the emotional design of scaffolds enhance learning and motivational outcomes in game-based learning? This was published in Journal of Computer-Assisted Learning. So this was quasi-experimental study. We utilized this value-added research approach to investigate whether emotional design applied to scaffolding improves learning and motivational outcomes more than emotionally neutral scaffold. Emotional design refers to use of bright colors, happy faces, and that kind of things that should, based on the, should affect your learning processes positively. And we compared this with this equivalent scaffolding mechanics that was emotionally neutral. As you can see, the mathematical content in both of these cases is same. In here, the verb divides the number line on the meaningful pieces. Here it's done with these mathematical hatch marks. In this case, the dog sniffs around the certain area in the number line. In this case, it is presented with this green bar. The adaptation in this, we have the three different strengths of scaffolding. This is the easiest or least support, and this is the hardest support. The middle one had here one marking that okay, here is 2 out of 2. 138 participants participated. They concluded 90 tasks, and half they used. Average scaffolding was 45 tasks within this intervention. So this was scaffolding. We used pre- and post-test measures for learning outcomes, and situational interest and self-efficacy were measured 3 times during the intervention in game with that mechanics I showed you earlier. So, yeah. So the results. Emotional design did not enhance learning more than scaffolding presented with abstract mathematical notations, but both these agents refers to emotionally designed agents, those emotional designs group. Both groups improved their fraction knowledge significantly, but there was no difference between the groups. Group who received emotionally designed scaffolding, their situational interest measured in game was significantly higher than the group who received the mathematical notation. And the group who received this emotionally designed scaffolding reported significantly higher self-efficacy during the intervention. So there were significant differences in situational interest and situational self-efficacy, but not in learning. Okay, I quickly present the next study. In this study, we focused on how strength and direction of difficulty adaptation affects situational interest in game-based learning. There is not actually that much information that focuses that how the strength of the adaptation is related to situational interest or motivational factors. We conceptualize situational interest as a motivational outcome, most associated as a, but We built the rationale for this study based on the self-determination theory, based on the flow theory, that for example, when you feel more competence, when the task difficulty is aligned with your current skill, your motivational state should be enhanced, and thus the motivational outcomes measured as situational interest should be enhanced. Okay. 167 fifth graders participated in the study. They concluded 144 tasks. Situational interest was measured 12 times during the intervention, perceived difficulty 9 times. And the effects of difficulty adaptation were examined by comparing task correctness, perceived difficulty, and situational interest across the 9 pairs of basic and adapted game levels. So, students had this basic game level without adaptation. First 8 tasks, 8 of those estimation tasks. Then we had an in-game measurements of how difficult it was perceived and how situationally interesting it was. Then we have had adapted game level with similar mathematical content. The could I say intrinsic difficulty of mathematical content did not differ between these two levels and in-game measurements. Here is the example how the adaptation was done. We, in the basic game level, we had this certain estimation accuracy that students should have when they estimated the fractions on the number line to get correct answer. In the adapted game level, the magnitude that can be considered correct when the task difficulty was adapted higher, it was smaller. And when the task difficulty was adapted to be lower, it was wider. So you could make more like bigger mistake when you are estimating the fraction magnitude. This is a bit hard to explain, but I guess you get the picture. Okay, we conducted manipulation checks to confirm that difficulty adaptation was implemented successfully, and it was based on the task correctness and perceived difficulty. Here you can see we analyzed 6 different adaptation levels. We had 2 adaptation levels that decreased the task difficulty, 1 minor adaptation of task difficulty downwards, low adaptation, 1 adaptation, minor adaptation upwards, and 1 major adaptation upwards. Based on the task correctness, it is quite nice that when we compare how many correct answers you get when your task difficulty is decreased, you get much more. And when the task difficulty is increased, you get much less, of course. But this is important procedure in a sense that we know that adaptation mechanics itself affected our task correctness as it should. The perceived difficulty, almost similar curve. When the task difficulty was adapted downwards, students felt the tasks were much easier, and when it was adapted upwards, they felt that it was harder. But interesting point about this perceived difficulty is that only major adaptations made significant difference in students' perceived difficulty. So when we adapt, do minor adaptations make any difference? In here, we have a result that only when we made a major adaptation of task difficulty, students felt it. They perceived it more difficult. This is interesting, and I don't know, based on the, for example, motivational theories, of course it is that if you need to feel competent, that minor adaptation, minor task difficulty, if you are really struggling, minor adaptation does not do anything. You don't feel that more competent. Okay, the situational interest part. The adaptation of difficulty positively impacted situational interest, but only for struggling participants for whom task difficulty was decreased in a major way. Only students whose task difficulty was decreased reported significantly higher situational interest. But students whose task difficulty was increased reported significantly lower situational interest. Still, it was the highest reporting situational interest group within this adaptation group, but they reported significantly lower situational interest. Yeah. And only participants who received a major adaptation of difficulty reported significant changes in perceived difficulty and situational interest. These are quite interesting that if we start to think about adaptation procedures within the game-based learning environments, how much we should adapt, and does the minor adaptation of, for example, task difficulty, some minor individualization that we, like at the beginning of the game, refer that, okay, you liked Egypt, for example, and then the game continues that we try to individualize that how much we have to do to really make effect, really affect students' motivational states. And to conclude, there are a couple of points. We found out that utilizing adaptation to individualize learning experiences can affect students' motivation, conceptualized as situational interest. Research with adaptive digital learning environments should utilize manipulation checks. For example, in study, 2 minor adaptations of task difficulty did not significantly affect the perceived difficulty. Researchers individualizing learning experiences with adaptation should apply a broad theoretical frameworks because, for example, the presented results of study 2, the task difficulty, cannot be fully explained from the perspective of enhanced difficulty skill balance. There is, of course, we have to consider that if we make the tasks harder, students make more errors, get less positive feedback, for example. Those are like things that when we individualize instruction, we should consider that how we can that when you are doing good and the game gives you harder, your amount of positive feedback and perhaps also self-efficacy can be lower. And the first study cannot be fully explained from the perspective of emotional design. We considered, for example, cognitive load, that emotional design increases your cognitive load and compared to those mathematical notations, and so your processing capabilities of this relevant, instructionally relevant information can be lower. But in general, we should aim to apply broad theoretical frameworks to try to understand this adaptation. And scholars utilizing adaptive learning environments should not only focus on examining how adaptation affects learning and motivation of a particular environment. Try to see the bigger picture. We should aim to, with adaptive research environments, we should aim to improve, contribute to the learning and motivational theories. Because I think that with these kind of adaptive procedures, we can actually make some sort of contribution, perhaps, to the general learning theories, general motivational theories, because these kind of research settings can be implemented with digital learning environments. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Antti. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation and your findings. So we have a couple of minutes for questions. I think there are a few questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful presentation, Antti. Thank you so much. So I was thinking about, as you're presenting your game-based learning environment, it's interesting as you're obviously presenting the research study, but I'm thinking about your environment also as a research tool, right? Kind of extending what we were talking about this morning, the workshop, it itself as a research tool to manipulate some of these processes that we've been talking about all day, and that you've also included in your presentation. Right. So not just instructional tool, but a research tool, and adding the multimodal data. Right. So yeah, just very interesting. It's very slick. It's very. It looks simple, but there's something aesthetically beautiful about it. It's clean. Yeah.
And me and of course Christian joined us as a main developer of this learning environment. We see it at least equal of this research tool as an instructional tool.
Dual purpose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I guess everybody wants coffee, but please contact me and Christian and we meet you.
So may I contribute also? Take a coffee, please.
Yeah. Please have a coffee in the main hall.
Yeah, but not now.
No, it's just one thing.
Or just, okay. I have just one question. With this first study, you found that this emotional design has the effect on the situated interest.
Yeah.
And what was the second?
Self-efficacy.
Yeah. Have you had any explanation for that?
Yeah.
It's because you did not measure anything in the learning outcome, but in the perception. Is it what you would have expected?
Regarding the self-efficacy, I think that regarding the emotional design that applied to scaffolding, it is really interesting to think that when you make mistake, you get these like positive inducing emotionally designed elements after you make mistake. And this was actually the case in this that, okay, we have this kind of bright colors already going on with the game, that only the scaffolding was provided. But I believe it's something that, and what we talked about this graceful mistake within game-based learning environments, that after we make mistake, if we still induce positive emotions with these emotionally designed pedagogical agents, it can be like, for example, this shows that situational interest and self-efficacy was increased compared to this plain mathematical notation.
Then it influences the next learning process.
No, hopefully. Of course, we are aiming to promote situational interest to develop in the individual interest.
And of course, the one problem is that we have not conducted a study in which we, for example, focus about how the learners actually process those scaffolds. So they are totally black box for us at the moment. Not totally, but not the proper study in the way. So are they just appealing, or can they actually utilize them in the way that we have designed? So we are thinking about some eye tracking studies and think aloud studies to get new insights about that. And of course, what comes to self-efficacy, so this was quite a short study. So if you think about, would it even affect to the learning outcomes in couple hours? But maybe if you get this like increased self-efficacy in the longer term, it might show up like a new feature. And we were using the delayed post test to see was there any difference based on these emotional features there.
Perfect. Thank you very much.